My friend came down with me yesterday, Joyce. She and my husband and I were like stair steps. All raised exactly the same. And she said, you have stain on your feet, you have paint on your clothes, you're slightly in disarray. What happened to the idea of being ladylike? And I said, that's what this whole show's about.
And I love that, and that's a really great introduction. Thank you, Fielden. I'm Kay Ryan Hennessy, the president here at Tag Gallery, and this is Tag Bytes, and I'm sitting in the gallery here with her artwork with Fielden Harper. Fielden, welcome and thank you. What a beautiful story and great introduction to the art.
Thank you.
I'm really excited about your show. It just tickles me pink because it touches on some of the feminine traditions that have been passed down in my family. Both sides had women who made quilts. And I have some quilts from my family that I keep at home with me all the time. And in fact, the one my grandmother made is one of my most treasured possessions. So it's really, really a joy for me to see how you've taken your traditions and you have applied them in the way that you would apply acrylic paint, which is your artistic milieu. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind that and how you decided to mix the two worlds together.
This show is almost an installation as opposed to an art exhibit. And it's asking a question, it's giving you information about who I am and what made me who I am. And it's asking you, ever so quietly in the background, who are you and how were you influenced? And every single piece of this, there's a historical background of how I came to it.
Tell us about a couple of them.
Well, a lot of them are this piece over here where I am rolling up bundles of cloth and putting them into a printer store and telling my story. And at the same time, I am telling my story, I am writing my story in a journal and writing it down so I make sure I know and I've committed myself to what I believe. And I put a few of these pages on the wall for people to understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so they're the iconic things that happened to me to form me. And one of them is how I became a quilt maker was I was making my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, decided that she was going to make a quilt for our oldest child and she wanted to teach me. So we would sit up and we would quilt all day long and then she'd go home and I discovered that she never knotted anything because she was getting older, it was hard for her to see, and she just thought, well, she'd leave the knots out and just go on as fast as she could. So I would, at night, re-stitch her work and remake what she had done. So that the next day, she never really, either she didn't catch on to it or she was smart enough to trick me, so I kept on going. But she never really acknowledged that. And so I learned how to make a quilt to make her feel better, and that's what quilts are all about.
Absolutely, absolutely, about wrapping yourself in
wrapping people you love in more love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a beautiful, beautiful story and beautiful reflection on the craft and the making.
Well, I'm from an area where the crafts of Appalachia are well respected and they're in evidence all the time. And when I applied to Otis, they asked me at one point, they said, what is your art background? And I said, I don't really have one. I made quilts with my grandmother. And they said, well, that's a craft and that doesn't belong here. And I said, well, I'm glad you cleared this up now because I don't belong here either because this is where I came from. And if you don't accept me as I am, I'm not going to change for you. So thank you, but no thank you. And the woman who was interviewing me threw herself across the door as I was going out. She said, I'm so sorry. can we start all over again? No, that was kind of an unusual way to start.
Yeah, but I mean, it certainly is so nice to see you carrying through those traditions in your personal background.
Right.
And I'm such a fan of these two pieces that we're sitting in front of, which are both titled "Which Came First?"
Mm-hmm.
Very cleverly done. And I love that they're matching. Can you tell us a little bit about the pattern and the decision making that went behind creating these?
Happy to. This I made a long time ago, and my MFA show was composed of these types of paintings. And what was going on was when we first moved out from Kentucky, when you grow up in a small town and you come to crossroads, you know what the next step will be. You know who lives there, where that road goes. And I tried that in Los Angeles. And so when I came out here, I just couldn't believe how vast it was, and it overwhelmed me. And in order to, I think, name my fear, I created small, like you do when you make a patchwork. Well, you make small areas and then fit them together. And so this is sort of my urban quilt on wood of how I felt about Los Angeles. And not too long ago, I was in a fabric shop, surprise, and I saw this, and with my popcorn brain, this suddenly transferred itself in my mind, not to the material, but to roads, but made out of material, and all of a sudden this idea was born of recreating this painting in fabric. And if you look at this corner right here in the road and the buildings, and then you look over here, it's exactly the same, even to the size. So the road, the buildings, and the top of the building, and the part you walk in, and then either this is a vacant lot or the top of the building. But, and that's how I happened to do it. And it was supposed to be exactly the right size. They were supposed to match 100%, and they did. And then a friend quilted it, and I washed it to fluff it up, and they're no longer the same size. Lesson learned. But you did ask me a quick question, is why I was doing this now. It's just, it's time. It's time, and my next show will not be this in its entirety, but I just had to share this kind of intimate part of me with people, and that seemed to be the medium that did it the best.
Yeah, no, I think it's delightful, and what I really love is that you've taken fabric and you have applied it in ways that we understand with the quilts,
Right.
And your installation of the journal entries on quilt squares. But you've also mixed fabric in a way that's really exciting, using it in as paint in collage, but also in the assemblage work, like you talked about earlier with your rolled fabric in the printer store. So there's a lot of materiality going on in the show, which
Right.
ties back to the title. What is it about material that speaks to you, or how does material in paint have a similar language?
Well, the reason I think that material speaks to me is that both of my grandmothers, I spent a great deal of time with them. My dad was a pilot in the Navy in World War II, and when he was transferred to different naval stations, he was an instructor. Sometimes he was going to be there so briefly, my parents left me with my grandparents, and I spent the time with them so I didn't have to switch schools. I was in 11 schools by the time I finished the third grade, so they were trying to kind of cut down on that. And my grandmothers both sewed, and they both had the same set of sensibilities that whatever hit the floor was mine. And I would sit in the room with them while they were sewing, and when it hit the floor, I could do anything I wanted to, and a number of these are that playful, and it introduced me to the playfulness of fabric. And I didn't always think of it as something that covered me. I thought of it as another way to express myself and to be. So, and yes, I forgot the rest of the question.
How does I think you answered it though a little. How does paint and fabric relate in a way to you? But I think you answered that with the sense of play.
Yeah, right. And
that's
exploration.
Right, and that's a beautiful way of thinking about it, and one of the really great benefits of being an artist at TAG is that we get to still be experimental with the art that we're creating,
Right.
And show it, which is always very exciting.
Right.
Yeah. Are there any big takeaways that you want people to know? Like if visitors could come in droves, and unfortunately we're closed to the public, so they can't. But if you could have all of the visitors that we could normally have in the gallery, what is the one thing you want them to walk away from after viewing this installation?
I think it's the thing that I mentioned at the beginning. If these are the factors that have influenced me, and then maybe somewhere in their minds they could think about, well, I would have loved to have done that. Why didn't I? Yeah. And just the thought process we have that of questioning that can maybe open them up and go, what made me who I am? And how can I express myself in that particular manner? So it's something, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher at heart. And I just felt that I wanted them to have something that they could just, a kernel that would lodge in their thoughts. And maybe they could build around.
Well, I love that. Thank you to Fielden. Thank you for coming. Thank you for planting these seeds of inspiration for all of us. Fielden's show, I Am a Material Girl, is on display at TAG, and that is July 13th through August 8th, 2020. This is another episode of TAG Bytes. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you soon.